Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to episode 39 of the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. But actually, after being on the road for 2 weeks, we'd actually prefer to be down at the ultra-cool pool of today's guest, CEO and chairman of Virtustream, Rod Rogers. Rod, welcome to the show.
How you guys doing? Great to be here.
We're doing well. So before we jump into Virtustream, let's kind of get to the first order of business. How are you feeling about your beloved Miami Heat these days? Big win last night.
Man, that was an awesome game last night. One of the best team wins I've ever seen them have. So yeah, I'm a huge fan. I'm a big LeBron fan and a big D Wade fan, and it's exciting, man. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, very, very cool.
It sort of counterbalances the torture of being a Dolphins fan.
So for anybody that doesn't know you, doesn't follow you on Twitter, for example, doesn't know you or doesn't know Virtustream, give us a little bit of background. How did Virtustream where are you guys today in the business? How'd you get into where you are, position you're in? A little bit of background.
Sure. So we're a relatively young company. We're about 3.5 years old. My co-founder, Kevin Reed, and business partner, and I put the business plan together for Virtustream in the second half of 2008. Kind of a bizarre time to raise capital and start up a company. It was kind of in the midst of the credit crisis, but we had done this once before. I was the former CEO of an IT services company called Adjoin that we started, right after the first tech bubble burst, and had a really successful outcome through, kind of a very difficult time to build a company. But our original charter and passion around this was to really kind of come up with a solution that would define what we call an enterprise class cloud solution that would be targeted for Fortune 1000, and specifically within that Fortune 500. And to that point, being able to handle these very large, complex, heterogeneous IT landscapes with a single provisioning engine, a single solution. Back then, AWS's EC2 is just kind of coming into mainstream IT vernacular, and we really respected and appreciated what that technology, the power of that technology in terms of its scalability, its economics, just the general efficiency of delivering compute in that public cloud type of format. We also saw, the benefits and the objectives of sort of the private cloud and the virtual private cloud provider marketplace. Having a lot of years of experience in selling the enterprise suite in the Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, we felt like we had a very good understanding of what enterprise CIOs were looking at in terms of requirements for their more heavyweight industrial application SLA level type of situations. We saw neither side necessarily being a complete solution. This kind of almost a religious war, at least there was a little while ago, and it's somewhat given way to the recent religious war on APIs and API standards. Say a year or so ago, there used to be kind of this group that would generally be Web 2.0 oriented, web scale, kind of open source oriented, software oriented public cloud group of pundits and marketeers and commercial providers, and they would kind of counterpoint and to some degree philosophically debate with more of an enterprise group, generally more of a proprietary software group, generally more defined as a private cloud solution or a virtual private cloud provider. The former group would essentially contend that all apps will be rewritten to be cloud intelligent, cloud ready apps. One size will generally fit all, and the like, and making sort of that assertion towards a more futuristic, modern sense of cloud technology. And the enterprise guys would tend to more fearmonger around security and performance. They would tend to have heavier weight, more single tenant oriented types of solutions. And while we didn't necessarily agree with either camp, we felt that our definition of an enterprise cloud, or what we call an enterprise class cloud, would be a solution that would be able to actually address both legacy applications and web scale applications, and it really kind of comes down to the use case. And the various storage and network and security solutions that you bring to bear, those various application use cases may differ. But we wanted to create a solution that ultimately, addressed a complete, large, sophisticated, heterogeneous landscape in the Fortune 500, and where, that Web 2.0 organization, and Netflix, Zynga being, very, marquee examples of that. They, in the enterprise, that's generally more the exception than the rule. You tend to, in these large Fortune 500 IT landscapes, have a heavyweight, heavy-duty enterprise app at its core. You generally will have varying tenures of web-developed apps satelliting around it. And then you'll generally have a certain new generation of cloud-ready apps that would be the most modern web-scale-oriented type of applications to service online retail application needs, content management, content distribution, that type of thing. So our original goal and desire was to essentially address both, taking the multi-tenant scalability and economic efficiency attributes of the public cloud and combining it with the security and performance attributes of the private cloud, creating and inventing really a new provisioning unit measure around that, which is something we call a micro VM, which is a logical container of compute, RAM, embedded network bandwidth commits, and embedded storage IOP commits. So we've kind of taken our provisioning unit we've taken the cloud down to its molecular level, if you will. We go into landscapes. We size that landscape in terms of the aggregate attributes that comprise those micro VMs. We then construct a pool of those micro VMs and then construct and deconstruct VMs across that pool. So in a sense, what we've done is virtualized VMs. We've taken a headroom, if you will, out of VMs that are many times sized around application peak load requirements and the like. And then adding to that, there's just a lot of kind of the uglier, dirtier, harder side of dealing with full enterprise requirements in the areas associated with security and audit and compliance, and those types of things. But our original objective is really to again come to the enterprise with a complete solution that addressed applications by way of use case, as opposed to imposing a cloud provisioning or cloud architectural solution, attempting to impose that across all apps or abandoning the apps that didn't necessarily work effectively with the cloud architecture that is being provided, and to ultimately take the concept of virtualization and cloud to its ultimate level of efficiency by getting to true consumption-based provisioning as opposed to VM-sized or VM allocation-based provisioning. So that was kind of our original objective. We set out to do that. We've patented a number of the technologies that we've developed. We developed our own software layer that does both resource pooling and just all the variety of workload management, provisioning, service orchestration elements of our provisioning engine. We've developed a portal that sits on top of that and manages that. And we have also connected that down to the actual virtualization fabric layer, where we are really hardware and virtualization hypervisor agnostic. We really work with anything out there. We tend to use KVM either through CentOS or through a Red Hat supported KVM for our web scale apps, and we tend to use ESX for our enterprise apps.
Okay, so a lot there, a lot to sort of digest. I think one of the things I'm hearing you say is, and this is always the challenge when you go talk to enterprise IT organizations, is part of what you're talking about to them is use cases and what do you do with legacy applications? Can you move things to the cloud? And to a certain extent, a lot of that, if you really boiled it down, comes down to how do I change without people's natural and sort of instinct that they reject change. They're not real happy with change. I think what you're kind of ultimately saying is if you could get away from having to think about this group has to change and they've got to learn a bunch of new tools, that group has to change, maybe this stuff can move. You're basically saying if you want web scale types of services, web scale type of how fast it can be provisioned, how easily it scales up or down, but you also want the ability to move maybe more traditional types of applications, and you can kind of hide some of that. You can give them a single way of managing it, a single view of it. I mean, that's really kind of the sweet spot that you're going after, which is not that IT has to radically change, but you're basically providing a service on top of that that says, don't think about this as complete silos, which a lot of times people naturally think about if they say, move my apps to the cloud or only go to web scale, or some of the religions that I think you were hitting on. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had 20 some odd years of institutional scar tissue of selling into the large enterprise. It's just not that easy. Many of the people that you hear making those assertions generally won't have that much experience working in the large enterprise, or generally, will just have a bit more of a naive view of that. The 70-80% of the spend that we're seeing in the IT landscapes of these large corporations are still in and around supporting legacy applications. So rather than abandon that 70-80%, we fully subscribe to the web scale, to the modernization of the app, right? So we believe the world will move completely there. What we're just saying is, in the time frame that it'll take to do that, which will be a very material period of time, we're also going to address this unique architecture, the ability to support these heavier weight I/O transaction intensive apps through our cloud solution, rather than discard them. That is kind of the one thing. We do not feel that it is proper to impose a one size fits all solution. We feel it's all around the app use case, and being able to have an efficient single pane of glass that drives to a provisioning engine that is suited for invariably the variety of different application use case requirements in the enterprise. And coming back to that definition of enterprise cloud, one of the things when I first got involved in this business is I heard the enterprise cloud almost referred to in a derogatory way, or as a derogatory term, if you will, by the pundits that were more advocates of the public cloud, the web scale cloud, and I actually think I agree with many of their assertions, but I actually refute essentially their definition of an enterprise cloud being sort of this brain stack of hardware with embedded capacity that's inelastic and the like. There are virtual private cloud providers out there that kind of created that opportunity to be accused of that. That there are certain guys out there, largely redistributors of VMware's IP, that tend to sell hosts in virtualized blocks. So they tend to be more single tenant oriented type of off-prem providers that are really almost outsourced virtualization. Mm-hmm. We reject that as being a cloud solution. We don't view that as a true cloud solution. So we agree with essentially the Web 2.0 crowd in that sense. Put it to appliance, you've got a very expensive on-prem virtualization to 2.0 rack. What we are saying is there are absolutely ways to service these non-cloud ready apps yet. These larger, heavier weight enterprise apps such as SAP, by way of breaking down your provisioning units, managing those resources in a pool, and thus being able to guarantee the attributes that are critical to servicing those applications, such as IOPS, really having throughput guarantees and application level latency SLAs and the like, gives an enterprise CIO the peace of mind to actually be able to put his SAP production instances in the cloud. And the only way that the way we've invented the ability to do that is to break down the VM into these fungible and these units of measure that allow us to share the attributes of those units of measure across the total landscape requirement. And then you basically only pay for the resources that you lit up and used in that resource grid over the course of the month. So what that allows us to do, essentially, Brian, is it allows us to provide application level SLAs for enterprise apps in an actual multi-tenant, highly elastic environment by way of essentially guaranteeing those sub-VM attributes back to that application.
Okay. All right.
Around it too, but that's kind of the core.
Yeah. Okay. So really kind of rethinking what makes up an application, what's really important versus what can be shared, ultimately how do you deliver the right sort of set of experiences for that application, and hiding some of the things that maybe, like you said, were baggage or scar tissue from before.
Exactly. And again, this doesn't in any way discard the intensity and the focus on modernization of the app in the enterprise and leveraging more of these new technologies. It's just simply saying, if you're going to do that, you're going to deliver a web scale oriented, you're going to use a distributed architecture based hypervisor, you're going to use different storage strategies, different network strategies. You just got to, we assert that in order to really effectively serve the enterprise cloud market over the course of, the next forward, how many years? Let's just say 5 years. 5 to 10 years, that you really have to have the ability to address all applications in that landscape rather than a small portion of them.
Okay. Very good. So let me hit on sort of one more technical angle, and then we'll start talking about the business side of what you do and your customers. So we're starting to see, you sort of hit on it, for the last couple of years and even over the last year, we're starting to see more sort of cloud service providers in general, kind of getting very deeply involved with creating their own standards. So whether it's things like OpenStack or around certain APIs, certain technical communities, this is a little bit of a shift. I mean, providers have always had some of their own intellectual property. They've developed some of their own software, but this feels like a shift in them trying to sort of own control of technology in order to drive customers their way or drive new adoption. You guys have won a number of awards from some of your partners. You talked about VMware, IBM, Red Hat, and some others. What's your take? What's Virtustream's take on kind of providers starting to get involved with sort of technology creation, standards creation, or how important is that to your customers for them to say, when I want to leverage a service, I want to know about interoperability, I want to know about standards. What's your take on that whole sort of stew that's going on out there?
Yeah, so in the enterprise, in sort of that enterprise marketplace that I just described, Fortune 1000, Fortune 500, the focus that we see the most today is on the underlying attributes of the cloud solution, first and foremost, right? That I kind of got a kick out of, when CloudStack contributed to the Apache Software Foundation, and that created, a lot of the dialogue between OpenStack's architecture, CloudStack's architecture, and ultimately who was more AWS compatible or API compatible. Lost in all that is really all the stuff under the API, right? The hardcore IP that's being brought to bear. So that would be sort of the first comment I would have to say. At the end of an API is still fundamentally the architecture and the solution of a particular cloud that may or may not meet that use case requirement, right? So the first and foremost, we're seeing our clients, and I've seen buyer IQ increase dramatically in the last year or so in the enterprise buying suite, if you will. A year ago or so, when these large companies were sort of considering cloud solutions, it was very early stage, very diligence. And now it's, here are my requirements. I need this type of SLA, I need this type of response time, I need this type of security protocol, and the like. So we're seeing much more established and mature and intelligent RFPs, quite frankly, coming out. And as it relates to these standards, I really think it's early days with this. One of the things that we looked to do is to, again, take our cloud solution down to its most molecular level, if you will. So one of the things, that concept of the micro VM unit of measure and what we do with it from a resource pooling and resource management standpoint, just that unit of measure itself, if you think about it, if we get to a market where you're truly seeing workload exchange, either within legal, I'll say beyond inside multiple entities, inside a single legal entity, but across legal entities, which is or what we call federation. We feel that, and again, part of our vision around creating the IP that we did around the micro VM is it would give us a way to kind of normalize a view of what workload usage was across varying degrees of cloud providers. So, you can have VMs of all different shapes and sizes servicing a particular environment by cloud provider A. If you're going to ultimately exchange and or trade workloads with another entity using a different flavor, different size, different shapes of VMs from a different cloud provider, there is a great value we feel into the mathematical normalization of consumption. So that's one of the things that we've been focused on, quite a bit. From an API standard standpoint, we've adopted for our external API, we've adopted the AWS API. We then have an internal API that we use to, convert the information passed in that API to all the stuff that we do within our architecture and IP. We don't feel like it makes sense to kind of swim against the tide from that standpoint. We're less really passionate about that, and more passionate about, okay, let's get let's get the information into our cloud, and then we'll take it and optimize it and provide the service back to that application use case.
Okay. Yep, absolutely makes sense. Actually, sort of news to me that you guys were. I like that approach, though. It's the API is the API. It's just a way of getting at functional capabilities, and why not take advantage of the fact that other people have written tools to that, and then internally you guys figure out ways to make that as appropriate for customers as possible. So I like that.
It's all about where you burn your cycles,
Yeah, exactly. So let's shift gears a little bit. You were supposed to have been on a trip over to the Middle East this week, so thank you for some rearrangement of schedule for coming on. You guys have presence around the world. You've got customers you're engaged with around the world. How much, when you're talking to people about enterprise cloud, obviously, what's considered sort of mainstream in, say, North America versus, say, emerging markets or somewhere else. What are you seeing as the differences in different regions around the world? What are people asking you for that are different in whether it's Asia or emerging markets or North America?
Sure. So I would say, from our experience, our North American clients are the most sophisticated in their requirement definitions, and from what we see, the most forward-thinking. So I would say the North American market is the most advanced in terms of imposing requirements on us to serve. I'd say Europe is pretty close, and we do most of our work. Again, when you're a younger company, everybody kind of, I think, to some degree, over-markets their footprint and over-markets what they are and what they do and the like. I tend to not be like that. In the European theater, we're largely operating in the UK. We have an office there and 2 cloud nodes in a data center that we own, and 2 data centers that we own there. And I would say that UK marketplace is very closely aligned to the US marketplace, the North American marketplace. It tends to move a little slower in its buying cycle, but it as it relates to the buyer attributes and the things that are critical for those folks, I would say it's pretty similar. So, and then the 2 other theaters of operation that we have experience in is Asia, and within Asia, Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Thailand, that area tends to operate a little bit differently than China, and a little bit differently than Japan, a little bit differently than say the Australian markets. That we sort of see 3 or 4 sub markets within that market. China right now is like the Wild West. I mean, it is, everybody's really kind of scurrying to organize, fund, and develop IP. There's quite a bit of there's just quite a bit of activity in that marketplace. The general enterprise landscape is much more dated there. So you're dealing with a lot of SAP R2 instances instead of R3 instances. It takes a lot of we talked about earlier to kind of it's even to the next stage of challenge, or even more. They're even more behind in terms of their upgrade cycles and the like. The Middle East, really virgin territory right now, as we see it. The ME and EMEA of that region for us is something that we're seeing a number of the different service providers really kind of mobilizing around, what their, service provision strategy is going to be, trying to define their marketplace, trying to, marry their infrastructure capabilities, and in some instances their infrastructure limitations, with, what that market would yield. So it's more of a kind of a business case to a cloud solution type of exercise there, where I would put the Asian regions certainly ahead of that, and there's a number of different Asian players that you could argue are well ahead of anybody, in terms of solutions and what they're driving. So to me, it's really less about the differing requirements and more about the stage of where these countries are and these subregions are within the overall macro region.
Okay, and obviously with you guys having a broad portfolio of ways to deliver services, that kind of gives you a way to say, if you're early stage, this may be a fit. If you're more mature and you've got more, like you said, more complex, more visionary types of things you're trying to do, the portfolio fits a little bit differently with those customers, I would think.
Yeah, one of the things that we've had some success with, there is at our core, we're fundamentally a software company, and we use our software to provision virtual private cloud environments as a CSP, cloud service provider. And in July, we are taking, we've been working on this for a year, we're taking our internal cloud provisioning engine and releasing it as an end software product. We'll announce that ahead of GigaOM Structure later this month. We'll be launching the beta version of that in July, and general release will be in August, and we're on track for that right now. But basically, what we've done is taken our internal cloud provisioning engine, our platform, Extreme, and have turned it into an end cloud enablement software product. So we will now have the ability to sell our software to companies that want to enable their own cloud in their own data centers, and it will have embedded DR and bursting capabilities back to our off-prem CSP-based cloud nodes. We very much believe in the hybrid market moving forward. We think that there's going to be, especially again within these large, sophisticated, heterogeneous environments, situations where companies will want to run their own clouds inside their own walls and optimize the assets that they have in terms of a sunk asset base, and then be able to leverage off-premise solutions as they need to. That term bursting, is such a, I almost bristle every time I hear somebody talk about the term in more simplistic ways. It's a really complex concept. There's much that needs to be accounted for in terms of OS versioning and software versioning and the like, in terms of being able to endeavor to execute effectively true workload exchange. But that's the direction of the marketplace, and so our focus has been to get to a highly differentiated set of IP first, and this micro VM architecture and our resource pooling algorithms and a variety of the other things that we do that we haven't even talked about on this call was sort of the first step. Second step for us is hybrid, and then the third step would be something we consider federation, which would be workload exchange across legal entities. So, creating the new intelligent community cloud, if you will.
Very, very cool. So interesting. So we'll when the links come out, when the information on that comes out in July, we'll let folks know. But it's an interesting kind of twist on how to basically take experience that you guys have in running a cloud, being able to then provide that to people who, like you said, may have those concerns about, is it on-premise, is it off-premise? But instead of it just being sort of a standalone, you make a decision, you guys are going to provide some hooks that will allow things to come back and continue to have that linkage back to the services that you guys run. So a little bit of a different twist on how to take experience that you have, intellectual property that you have, and like you said, sort of take it to that next phase of sort of hybrid / federation. So very, very cool. So one last question I'll ask, because I know you're obviously extremely busy. Last year, Virtustream acquired Anomaly, and one of the highlights, amongst other things, was some access to Asian markets. Reuven had been driving a lot of things around those space. But one of the other ones that was kind of interesting, and haven't heard a ton about it since then, was they had started kind of a brokerage service, the ability to sort of start literally treating compute capacity compute capacity as a commodity, just like you would trade gold or dollars or anything else. What's going on in that space? How do people understand it? How have you guys evolved it? It got a lot of buzz kind of early on from financial markets saying, "Oh, okay, the big switch concept is here." But what's really going on in that space?
Well, I was pretty open about this when we did the deal. So I had the opportunity to meet Reuven some time ago, and we've been talking for a while philosophically about the whole concept of workload exchange and where it would what the use case would be to commercialize it, to truly commercialize it. And fundamentally, when we acquired Anomaly, it was really for a couple of different reasons. The lesser important reasons were we were able to obtain some software IP from them that we integrated into our stack that helped round out some of our more web scale oriented solutions. So with TCP, we were able to take components of that and integrate it into the Extreme stack for virtual machine management, leveraging CentOS, the OpenStack API that they had built, and a few other things. But really, at the end of the day, and I had kind of come out publicly and said this, we do not necessarily believe or ascribe to that generic public-to-public workload exchange or that untrusted exchange. It's there. It's kind of a unique idea, and it may evolve, as the space and as technology evolves. But what we really believe in is a federated, a private, trusted exchange where you would have a non-competitive group of companies that are either working in a collaborative format or perhaps in a supply chain format of some nature, essentially looking to leverage available capacity and available asset-based investments among each other. So we very much believe in the future of the trusted private federated exchange between, or I should say, across legal entities. So that first example that I gave, at the educational, the university circuit, one of the things that we're actually looking at doing right now is taking Spot Cloud as a core and making it available to a number of higher education institutional consortiums, so that they can actually share a workload exchange across their needs and their requirements. We're talking to a couple of them now. We're actually even considering open sourcing components of that and the like. We're really in the midst of kind of getting our strategy together on that. On the more commercial side of it, try and picture, say the healthcare industry, where you have manufacturers, distributors, and retailers in the form of healthcare providers, let's say. And ultimately having the ability to link the asset base, the technology asset base of those corporations together, so they could share workload requirements or can share the technology that's required to support their workload requirements in a manner that would be accretive to the overall supply chain. That's what we really see as the forward federation market. And what we did in Spot Cloud, what we saw there was code that was very well developed around commercial workload exchange. So what we did was we acquired that IP and repurposed it. Again, we've kind of done an organ transplant, if you will, into the Extreme stack, and in 2013 we'll be releasing a product that we call the Extreme Exchange, which would be targeted at a trusted private cloud federation across legal entities, and at its core will be leveraging that workload exchange logic that we acquired out of Spot Cloud, but just repurposing it and applying it to a very different use case.
Sure. Okay. Well, very, very interesting. So, very much like you're talking about, it's an evolution. It's looking at how companies really work together, like you said, whether it's partnerships, supply chain, trying to solve similar problems where the byproduct is good for everybody. So it'll be interesting to see. And like you said, it's maybe as a standalone, it's wasn't necessarily perfect, but the core of what it was trying to do gives you a unique sort of head start of what people are trying to do. So very, very good. So Rod, thank you so much for your time. I think we're sort of hitting the end of where we could probably dive into a lot of things that the show would get very, very long. So so thank you so much for being on. First off, best of luck to the Heat, both in the Eastern Conference Finals, and as they probably take on the Spurs here in about a week or so. For everybody listening, thanks for listening. We're out of time for the week. You can always follow us on Twitter at @thecloudcastnet, or of course on our website at thecloudcast.net. You can check out all the website updates. You can check out our YouTube channel, and of course you can get the show on YouTube and Stitcher. So for Rod, for myself and Aaron, thanks for listening. Everybody have a great weekend.